What if I told you that one of the most common pieces of parenting advice you've ever heard may never have existed for most of human history? Not 50 years ago, not 500, but for hundreds of thousands of years. Today, a crying baby can make parents feel something almost instantly. Panic, guilt, embarrassment. Questions begin racing through your mind. Am I doing something wrong? Should I pick them up? Am I creating a bad habit? Am I comforting them too much? Or not enough? And before long, someone has advice. Your parents, your friends, social media, books, podcasts, even complete strangers at the grocery store. Everyone seems to know what you should do when a baby cries. But here's the question. Have humans always believed those same things? Or did some of those ideas appear only very recently? Because for almost all of human history, there were no parenting books, no baby sleep experts, no internet, no parenting influencers, no online debates. Yet, generation after generation, human babies survived. Not only survived, they became the most successful species on Earth. So, what did parents actually do when their babies cried? Did they always rush to comfort them? Did they let them cry? Or is the real answer far more surprising than either side imagines? Today, we're going back tens of thousands of years to uncover the parenting myths that have quietly survived into modern life. And the very first one may completely change the way you hear your babies cry. Myth 1. A good parent never lets a baby cry. Imagine it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Your baby wakes up crying. You haven't slept for days. Your back hurts, your eyes burn. You finally manage to settle them. Then, 5 minutes later, they're crying again. Sound familiar? Now imagine the exact same scene 30,000 years ago. No nursery, no crib, no white noise machine, no baby monitor, no electric lights. Just darkness, a small fire, a sleeping group of perhaps 20 or 30 people. Your baby starts crying. What happens next? Many people imagine ancient parents simply picked the baby up every single time. Others imagine they ignored the crying completely. Interestingly, anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies have found that reality is usually much more nuanced. Among several foraging societies, babies are often kept physically close for much of the day. They're carried frequently, fed responsively, comforted quickly. Not because parents believed it would make them smarter, but because in those environments, keeping a baby close made practical sense. It helped regulate body temperature, made breastfeeding easier, reduced the risk of accidental separation, and allowed adults to keep moving while caring for an infant. But here's the fascinating part. That doesn't mean babies never cried. They absolutely did, just like babies today. Human infants haven't changed much in the last few thousand years. What changed was the world around them. Today, many parents hear crying inside a quiet house. Ancient parents heard crying while gathering food, crossing rivers, preparing meals, watching older children avoiding danger. No parent, in any era, could respond instantly every single time. Sometimes the baby waited, sometimes another adult responded, sometimes an older sibling did. Sometimes the crying simply lasted a little longer. Not because parents didn't love their children, but because life was happening around them. And that's the detail most modern conversations completely miss. If babies have always cried and loving parents couldn't always respond immediately, then why does a baby's cry feel almost impossible for us to ignore? Why does your heart race within seconds? Why can a sound only a few months old completely override your own need for sleep? The answer isn't parenting. It's neuroscience. And once you understand how evolution designed the adult brain, you'll never hear a baby's cry. Myth 2. The sooner your baby becomes independent, the better. Imagine you're holding your 3-month-old baby. They're asleep, peacefully, warmly, completely relaxed. Then you gently lower them into the crib. And suddenly, their eyes open. Their tiny face changes. Within seconds, they're crying. Again. If you're a parent, you've probably lived through this dozens, maybe hundreds of times, and almost immediately someone says, "Don't pick them up." They're becoming too dependent. You need to teach them independence, otherwise they'll always need you. But have you ever wondered where that idea came from? Because for almost all of human history, an independent baby would have been one of the most dangerous things imaginable. Imagine you're living 20,000 years ago. You're walking through open grasslands. or dense forests. There's no fenced backyard, no baby gates, no security cameras, no heated nursery. Every sound could mean danger. Wild animals, harsh weather, a sudden fall, getting separated from the group. In that world, a baby who wanted to stay close to an adult wasn't weak. That baby was behaving exactly as evolution intended. In fact, human babies don't just prefer closeness, their entire nervous system expects it. Scientists often describe human infants as one of the most neurologically immature mammals at birth. Unlike many animals that can walk within hours, our babies arrive, still needing months of brain development outside the womb. Some researchers even refer to this period as an extra trimester. That means your baby's brain isn't simply learning about the world, it's also learning whether the world is safe. And one of the biggest signals their brain uses to answer that question is you. Your heartbeat, your voice, your smell, your touch, your face. These aren't just comforting, they're biological information. They help regulate heart rate, stress responses, body temperature, and emotional regulation. Long before a baby understands words, their brain is already learning through connection. Now here's something fascinating. When researchers observed many hunter-gatherer communities, they noticed that babies spent an extraordinary amount of time being carried. Not because parents believed they'd become more successful adults, not because someone wrote it in a parenting book, but because it simply fit the way humans lived. Adults walked, gathered food, worked, talked, and babies came along, securely attached to someone's body, often not just their mother's. A father, a grandmother, an older sibling, another trusted adult. The goal wasn't independence. The goal was connection, because connection kept babies alive. And here's the irony. Many modern parents worry that responding to their baby's need for closeness might make them too dependent. Yet, developmental psychologists have spent decades studying something that appears almost paradoxical. Children who experience consistent, responsive caregiving often become more confident explorers, not less. Why? Think about how mountain climbers use a safety rope. The rope doesn't stop them from climbing, it gives them the confidence to climb higher. For young children, trusted caregivers often serve a similar purpose. Psychologists call this a secure base. When children feel secure, they're often more willing to explore, more willing to learn, more willing to take healthy risks. Independence doesn't usually begin with distance. It often begins with security. Which raises an interesting question. If babies weren't designed to become independent overnight, then when does independence actually begin? Does it happen because parents teach it? Or does something remarkable begin happening inside a child's brain long before anyone notices? The answer takes us to one of the biggest misunderstandings about childhood itself. Because for thousands of years, parents weren't trying to make children independent as quickly as possible. They were preparing them for something far more important. And surprisingly, it had almost nothing to do with parenting books. In the next myth, we're going to challenge another idea that almost every parent hears at some point. Only parents shape a child's future. But what if history tells a completely different story? What if the people who influenced your child the most weren't always their mother or father? That discovery changed the course of human evolution itself. Myth 3. Parents alone shape a child's future. Have you ever noticed how much pressure modern parents carry? From the moment their child is born, they're told that almost everything depends on them. Read the right books, choose the right toys, feed the right foods, speak the right words, limit screen time, encourage independence, build confidence, teach kindness, teach resilience, protect mental health, support emotional intelligence, and somehow, while doing all of that, don't make mistakes. Because, according to modern culture, your child's future is almost entirely your responsibility. But was it always this way? Imagine a child living 15,000 years ago. They wake up not inside a quiet suburban home, but inside a small camp. Around them, people are already awake. Someone is preparing food, someone is repairing tools, someone is telling stories. Children are already playing together, grandparents are watching. Older teenagers are helping. Adults move freely between one another. Now ask yourself, who is teaching this child? The answer is almost everyone. And anthropologists who have studied hunter-gatherer societies notice something remarkable. Children rarely spend their entire day with only their mother or father. Instead, they interact with dozens, sometimes even hundreds of different people over the course of childhood. Every conversation teaches something. Every shared task teaches something. Every story teaches something. Every older child becomes a teacher. Every grandparent becomes a living library. Even people who aren't related often become trusted caregivers. Anthropologists call this alloparenting. It simply means that caring for children is shared among many people, not just biological parents. And interestingly, humans are one of the few species where this happens on such a large scale. Now think about your own childhood. Can you remember a teacher who changed your life? A grandparent whose advice still stays with you? A coach who believed in you? An uncle who inspired you? A neighbor who made you feel safe? For many people, those memories last a lifetime, because children don't only learn from the people who raise them, they learn from the people who surround them. And here's something that surprises many parents. Research in developmental psychology shows that children are extraordinary social learners. From infancy, they're constantly watching who smiles, who shares, who comforts, who gets angry, who solves problems, who tells stories. Long before children understand the rules, they're observing the people living those rules. They're learning not just from instruction, but from participation. That's exactly how our ancestors learned. There were no classrooms, no YouTube tutorials, no parenting podcasts. Children learned by watching, by copying, by helping. A young child might spend the morning watching someone make a fire, the afternoon following older children through the forest, the evening listening to stories around a campfire. Learning wasn't a scheduled activity, it was daily life. Now compare that to today. Many families live far away from grandparents. Neighbors barely know each other. Children spend more hours indoors. Parents often feel they must become teacher, coach, psychologist, nutritionist, storyteller, and entertainer, all at once. It's exhausting, not because modern parents aren't capable, but because they're attempting a job that evolution rarely expected one or two adults to do alone. This doesn't mean children need a literal village to thrive. Modern life is different. Many families don't have large communities nearby, but the principle may still matter. A caring grandparent, a trusted teacher, a loving aunt, a supportive neighbor, a family friend, a coach, a mentor. Each one adds something a parent simply cannot replace. Not because parents aren't enough, but because children have always grown through relationships, not isolation. And perhaps that's why so many parents feel guilty for asking for help. Some believe they're failing if someone else looks after their child. Yet for most of human history, accepting help wasn't failure. It was normal, it was expected, and quite possibly it was one of the reasons our species became so successful. But here's a mystery that anthropologists still find fascinating. If children spent so much time learning from other people, why didn't they simply copy everyone? How did they know who to trust, who to imitate, who to ignore? The answer reveals one of the most remarkable abilities inside the human brain. Because children aren't just born to learn, they're born to choose who they learn from. And that brings us to our next myth. Myth 4. More toys create smarter children. Walk into almost any baby store, and you'll see an entire aisle promising to make your child smarter. Educational toys, sensory toys, brain development toys, Montessori toys, STEM toys, flashcards, interactive books, electronic learning devices. Some even promise to boost intelligence before your baby can even speak. As parents, it's easy to think, if I buy the right toys, my child will have a better start in life. But here's a question, one that's rarely asked. If toys are the secret, then how did humans become the most intelligent species on Earth before toys even existed? Imagine a baby 20,000 years ago. There are no colorful plastic blocks, no battery-powered learning toys, no musical activity centers, no alphabet puzzles, no baby gyms. So what surrounded that child? Faces, voices, nature, movement, fire, animals, water, trees, stones, leaves, and most importantly, people. For almost every waking hour, babies watched. Someone doing something meaningful. Someone making tools. Someone preparing food. Someone weaving baskets. Someone repairing clothing. Someone telling stories. Someone laughing. Someone singing. Someone solving problems. The world itself became their classroom. Now here's something remarkable. A newborn baby doesn't understand language, but within months, their brain is already working incredibly hard. They're watching where you look, listening to the rhythm of your voice, studying your facial expressions, learning which sounds belong to their language, trying to predict what you'll do next. They're not simply playing, they're collecting data. Every second, every smile, every conversation, every shared glance. Their brain is building the foundations of human intelligence. Scientists have discovered that one of the strongest predictors of early language development isn't the number of toys inside a home. It's the quality of responsive interaction. Simple moments like talking during diaper changes, singing songs, reading together, responding to your baby's sounds, and having back-and-forth conversations, even before they can speak, provide rich opportunities for learning. Notice something. None of those require expensive products. Now, this doesn't mean toys are useless. Far from it. Blocks can teach spatial thinking. Puzzles can build problem-solving skills. Pretend play encourages imagination. Construction toys support creativity. Many toys are wonderful tools, but here's the key word: tools. A hammer doesn't build a house by itself, and a toy doesn't build a child's brain by itself. What transforms a simple toy into a learning experience is often the person playing alongside the child. Think back to your own childhood. Can you remember every toy you owned? Probably not, but chances are you remember who played with you. The parent who built towers just so you could knock them down. The grandparent who made funny voices while reading stories. The sibling who turned an empty cardboard box into a spaceship. Those moments weren't memorable because of the object. They were memorable because of the connection. And here's perhaps the most surprising discovery. Researchers studying hunter-gatherer children have observed that children often create their own toys from whatever surrounds them. A stick becomes a fishing rod, a rock becomes treasure, leaves become pretend food, a fallen branch becomes a horse. The object itself isn't what's magical, the imagination is. Children don't naturally separate learning from play. To them, they're the same thing. Now compare that to modern life. Sometimes we worry that our child doesn't have enough toys, enough activities, enough stimulation, enough enrichment. But perhaps the better question isn't, does my child have enough toys? Perhaps it's, does my child have enough opportunities to explore, to imagine, to ask questions, and to connect with people? Because history suggests that those experiences have shaped human minds for hundreds of thousands of years, long before the first toy store ever opened. But here's where the story becomes even more unexpected. If children didn't need constant entertainment, then why do so many modern parents feel guilty whenever their child says, "I'm bored"? Could boredom actually have served an important purpose throughout human evolution? The answer might completely change the way you think about play, creativity, and childhood itself. Because our next myth is one almost every parent hears. Myth 5. Good parents keep their children entertained all day. Imagine it's Saturday morning. Your child says, "I'm bored." Almost instantly, many parents feel a strange sense of responsibility. Maybe I should plan an activity. Maybe I should buy something new. Maybe I should be playing with them right now. Some even feel guilty if their child spends just a few minutes doing absolutely nothing. But here's a question. When did boredom become a parenting emergency? Because for almost all of human history, children spent far more time without organized entertainment than with it. Imagine a group of children living 15,000 years ago. There are no tablets, no television, no organized sports, no birthday play centers, no educational YouTube videos, no weekend schedules filled from morning until night. So what did children do? At first glance, it seems like nothing, but look closer. One child is stacking stones. Another is following insects. Someone else is climbing a fallen tree. A few older children have invented a game with sticks and imagination. No adult planned the activity. No one gave instructions. The game simply emerged. Anthropologists who have studied hunter-gatherer societies noticed something remarkable. Children often spent large parts of their day playing free with other children. Adults usually remained nearby, working, talking, preparing food, or making tools. But they didn't constantly direct every moment of children's play. Instead, children explored, experimented, negotiated, argued, invented rules, solved problems, and then changed the rules all over again. To an adult, it might have looked like random fun. But beneath the surface, something extraordinary was happening. Every pretend game was teaching social skills. Every disagreement was teaching negotiation. Every climb was teaching risk assessment. Every failure was teaching problem solving. Play was never just play. It was childhood's classroom. Now compare that to modern life. Many children move from school to organized sports, to music lessons, to tutoring, to carefully planned activities. Even free time often comes with instructions. Color inside the lines, follow the steps, press the right button, complete the challenge. Without realizing it, we sometimes replace exploration with entertainment. Here's something fascinating. Developmental psychologists have found that when children have opportunities for self-directed play, they practice skills that adults can't easily teach through instruction alone. Planning, creativity, decision-making, emotional regulation, cooperation, conflict resolution. Because when adults solve every problem, children lose the chance to solve some themselves. Now, this doesn't mean parents shouldn't play with their children. Those shared moments are incredibly valuable. Reading together, building together, laughing together, creating memories together, those moments strengthen relationships. But there's an important difference between playing with a child and feeling responsible for entertaining them every waking minute. Children don't just need engaged parents. Sometimes they also need space. Space to wonder, space to experiment, space to make mistakes, space to become the authors of their own games. Think about your own childhood. What do you remember most? Was it every toy someone bought for you? Or was it building a fort out of blankets, turning cardboard boxes into castles, pretending the floor was lava? Those games weren't designed by adults. They were designed by children. And perhaps that's exactly why they were so unforgettable. Here's an interesting thought. Throughout human history, children didn't become creative because adults constantly entertained them. They became creative because they had moments when nothing was planned. Moments when boredom quietly whispered, "Go create something." Maybe boredom was never the enemy. Maybe it was the beginning of imagination. But then another question appears. If children learned so much through play, observation, and community, where did discipline fit in? Did ancient parents constantly correct every mistake? Did they punish every act of disobedience? Or did they understand something about children's behavior that many of us are still trying to figure out today? Myth 6. Ancient fathers were just providers. Close your eyes for a moment and picture a prehistoric family. What do you see? A father walking through the forest with a spear, hunting for food, returning home only after sunset, while the mother raises the children alone? It's the picture most movies have taught us. The hunter, the protector, the provider. But here's the question, was that really the whole story? For decades, many people imagined that prehistoric fathers had one primary job: bring home food. Everything else belonged to mothers. But as anthropologists spent more time studying hunter-gatherer societies, they began noticing something surprising. Human fathers were doing far more than many people expected. Unlike most mammals, human fathers often remained part of their children's lives for years, not just for days, not just until weaning, but throughout childhood. From an evolutionary perspective, that's unusual. Among many mammals, the father's role ends very early, sometimes before the offspring are even born. But humans took a different path. Why? Because human children are incredibly expensive to raise, not financially, biologically. Our children depend on adults for longer than almost any other species. Their brains continue developing for years. They require food, protection, teaching, comfort, social learning. One adult simply couldn't do everything alone. The success of human children often depended on cooperation, and fathers became one important part of that team. Researchers studying modern hunter-gatherer communities have observed that fathers often carry infants, play with them, protect them, teach older children, share food, comfort distressed children, and interact far more frequently than many people assume. Exactly how much involvement varies between cultures. There was never one universal model of fatherhood. But the stereotype that fathers only hunted and never parented doesn't capture the full picture. Here's something you might not know. Human fathers are among the most involved fathers in the animal kingdom. Think about that for a moment. Across thousands of mammal species, very few males invest as much time, energy, and care into raising offspring as human fathers often do. That's not an accident. It's part of what made our species successful. Now, does that mean every prehistoric father spent hours playing with babies? Of course not. Life was difficult. Food had to be gathered, shelters had to be built. Danger was everywhere. Responsibilities were shared differently across environments and cultures. But human evolution didn't create children who only benefited from one caregiver. It created children who benefited from many: mothers, fathers, grandparents, older siblings, extended family, trusted members of the community. Each person added something unique. Think about your own life. Can you remember something your father taught you that nobody else did? Maybe it wasn't a lecture. Maybe it was fixing something together, throwing a ball, building a shelf, cooking, fishing, riding a bicycle. Sometimes the greatest lessons aren't spoken, they're observed. Children watch adults constantly, how they solve problems, how they respond to stress, how they treat others, how they recover after failure. Whether it's a mother or a father, children are always learning. Perhaps the real lesson isn't about proving that fathers were more important than mothers, because that's the wrong comparison. The story of human parenting has never been about competition. It's been about cooperation. Every caregiver contributed something different, and together those differences helped children survive and eventually build civilizations. But here's the fascinating part. If children learned so much simply by watching adults, why didn't adults spend all day teaching them? Why weren't there lessons, classrooms, or lectures? How did children learn the complex skills needed to survive? The answer might completely change the way you think about education itself. Because our next myth is one that has followed humanity for thousands of years. Our myth 7. Children should always learn from adults. Imagine you're 7 years old living 15,000 years ago. There are no classrooms, no teachers, no report cards, no homework, no school bells, no desks, no PowerPoint presentations. No one says, sit down, pay attention. Today's lesson is, yet somehow, that child grows up knowing how to find food, build shelter, track animals, identify dangerous plants, navigate forests, understand seasons, work with others, raise children, and eventually teach the next generation. How? Who taught them? Most of us imagine an adult carefully explaining every skill. But anthropologists who have studied hunter-gatherer societies have found that children often spend far less time receiving formal instruction than we might expect. Instead, they spend countless hours watching, listening, following, helping, experimenting, and perhaps most importantly, playing with older children. Think about how a toddler learns to speak. Very few parents sit down and teach grammar. They don't begin with verbs, or sentence structure, or vocabulary lists. Children learn because they're surrounded by conversation. They listen, they imitate, they experiment, they make mistakes, and slowly, without even realizing it, their brains discover the patterns of language. Now imagine that same process applied to almost everything else. A young child watches an older sibling tie a knot. A few days later, they try. It doesn't work. They try again. A teenager watches adults prepare food. Eventually, they join in, not because someone announced a lesson, but because participation became learning. Researchers often describe humans as extraordinary social learners. We're not born knowing everything. We're born knowing how to learn from other people. Children constantly ask, sometimes without speaking, who is successful? Who do others trust? Who should I copy? Then, almost automatically, their brains begin imitating. Not everything, just the things that seem important. Here's something parents often notice. Have you ever caught your child using one of your phrases? Making the same facial expression? Standing exactly like you? Using the same tone of voice? Maybe even saying something you wish they hadn't heard. Children don't only learn from what we teach, they learn from what we do. Every day. Even when we don't realize they're watching. Now here's the surprising part. Anthropologists have found that in many traditional societies, older children play an enormous role in teaching younger ones. Not through lectures, through games, through imitation, through shared adventures. The 5-year-old watches the 10-year-old, copies the teenager copies the adults. Knowledge flows naturally through the community, almost like a river. No one controls it. Yet, everyone contributes. Compare that to modern life. Many children spend most of their learning hours with adults, parents, teachers, coaches, instructors, structured lessons, organized activities. All of those can be incredibly valuable, but perhaps something else has quietly disappeared. The freedom for children to learn from each other, to invent games, to solve disagreements, to explain ideas in their own words, to become teachers themselves. Think back to your own childhood. Who taught you to ride a bicycle? Maybe it wasn't your parents. Who showed you the rules of your favorite game? Who introduced you to your first hobby? Who taught you how to climb a tree? For many of us, those memories don't begin with adults. They begin with another child. Maybe that's because children understand other children in ways adults sometimes can't. They speak the same language, share the same imagination, make the same mistakes, and together they discover solutions. This doesn't mean adults aren't important. Far from it. Adults provide safety, guidance, values, experience, wisdom. But perhaps our greatest role isn't always to give every answer. Sometimes it's to create an environment where children can discover answers together. Because history suggests the greatest classroom humanity ever built didn't have walls. It wasn't filled with desks or textbooks or examinations. It was filled with people, young and old, learning from one another every single day. But after everything we've explored, one final question remains. If babies evolved to seek connection, if villages mattered, if play mattered, if fathers mattered, if communities mattered, then why do so many parents today still feel like they're failing? Why does parenting often feel harder than ever, even though we have more information than any generation before us? The answer isn't another myth. It's something millions of parents carry quietly every single day. The belief that somewhere there exists a perfect parent. And that's where our final myth begins. Myth 8. The perfect parent exists. Take a deep breath and think back to the very first day you became a parent. Maybe you held your baby and silently promised, "I'll do everything right. I'll never make the mistakes my parents made. I'll always know what my child needs." But then reality arrived. The sleepless nights, the endless questions, the moments when nothing seemed to work. Your baby cried and you couldn't understand why. You read one article, then another. One expert said, "Pick them up immediately." Another said, "Give them time." One book recommended strict routines. Another insisted babies should lead the schedule. The more advice you found, the more confusing parenting became. And somewhere, without even realizing it, many parents began believing that there must be someone out there who has figured it all out, the perfect parent. But here's the question. Has there ever been such a person? Not today. Not 100 years ago. Not 10,000 years ago. Imagine a mother living 20,000 years ago. Some days she found enough food. Some days she didn't. Some nights her baby slept peacefully. Other nights, no one slept. Sometimes she made the right decision. Sometimes she probably wished she had chosen differently. She wasn't perfect. Neither was the father. Neither were the grandparents. Neither was the village. They were simply human, just like us. Throughout this documentary, we've traveled. Across thousands of years, we've explored why babies cry, why they seek closeness, why villages mattered, why play mattered, why fathers mattered, why children learned through observation. And perhaps the biggest lesson was never about ancient parents. It was about expectations. Modern parents often carry an invisible weight, the belief that every decision could shape their child's entire future. The right school, the right toys, the right bedtime, the right words, the right activities, the right parenting style. As though raising a child is an exam where every answer must be perfect. But history tells a different story. Humanity wasn't raised by perfect parents. It was raised by ordinary people. People who loved deeply, who made mistakes, who learned, who adapted, who asked others for help, and who kept showing up the next day. Developmental psychologists often describe something called good enough parenting. The idea isn't that parents must respond perfectly every single time. It's that children benefit from caregivers who are generally responsive, emotionally available, and willing to repair after mistakes. Because relationships aren't built on perfection. They're built on connection. Even moments of misunderstanding, followed by comfort, can become part of healthy development. Children don't need perfect parents. They need parents who keep coming back, who listen, who learn, who apologize when necessary, who love consistently. Maybe that's why human evolution never selected for perfect parents. It selected for adaptable ones. Parents who could learn, cooperate, support one another, and keep going, even when life became difficult. Because raising a child was never meant to be flawless, it was meant to be shared. So what have 30,000 years of human history really taught us? Not that our ancestors had all the answers. They didn't. Not that modern parenting is wrong. It isn't. But perhaps they remind us of something beautifully simple. A baby's cry isn't a failure. Wanting closeness isn't a weakness. Playing isn't wasted time. Curiosity isn't something we teach. It's something we protect. And parenting was never supposed to be a performance. It was always a relationship. The next time your child asks you to read the same story for the 10th time, the next time they reach for your hand instead of walking alone, the next time they ask, "Will you play with me?" Remember this. They won't remember whether dinner was perfectly healthy every single night. They won't remember whether the laundry was folded on time. They probably won't remember which toy cost the most, but they'll remember how they felt when they were with you. Safe, loved, seen, heard. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson our ancestors can still teach us today. Not how to become perfect parents, but how to become human parents. For hundreds of thousands of years, humanity didn't survive because parents had perfect answers. It survived because they loved, adapted, shared the journey, and never stopped learning. Maybe that's the real secret, hidden inside human evolution. And maybe the greatest gift you'll ever give your child isn't perfection. It's simply being there, again and again and again, until one day they no longer need to hold your hand. But they'll always remember that you held theirs. Thank you for watching. If this documentary changed the way you think about parenting, share it with another parent. Because sometimes the oldest lessons are exactly the ones we need most. Until next time, take care.